And he tells his officers, "We've been given the supreme honor of being the rear guard at Dunkirk. Go and tell your platoons the good news." Aggressive. And he had a very interesting way of dealing with the Luftwaffe Stukas. What he told to his men: stand up to them, shoot at them with a Bren gun from the shoulder, take them like a high pheasant, give them plenty of lead, fight quid to any man who brings down one.
Good luck with that one.
And he was mentioned in the dispatches and was given command of the 18th Infantry Territorial Division, which is traded Britain but was intended to be used overseas. In 1942, after a long sea voyage, they arrived for the Battle of Singapore as his men arrived on the 8th of February. And unfortunately, he is going to be one that, due to Percival's brilliant planning, not involved in this. He would be captured because he refused to abandon his men, conducted himself well. But in 1942, in a prisoner of war camp, he does pass away. It's not mentioned whether he was tortured or died of illness and such. So that is just one thing I would just add. Next, we have Lieutenant General Lewis Heath, and he was a distinguished military officer from the British Indian Army. He suffered eye damage in World War I, as you can see on his face. And that was actually his lost eye, I believe. And he also suffered permanent damage to his left arm in the war. And regardless, he was given a military cross, and in the interwar period, he served in the British Indian Army quite admirably. Despite such pretty harsh injuries, he continued to serve himself and advanced up the ranks. And by 6th May, he again got a DSO for his defense of the Northwest frontiers. And he was given command of the 5th Indian Infantry Division for the East Africa campaign in the late 1940. This is part of a small 9,000-man force that was supposed to keep the Italian armies in Ethiopia occupied. I think in Ethiopia, they had about 300 to 350,000 men. So the British had their tasks cut out for them. And did quite well there in the entire campaign. That May 1941, he's promoted to a full rank of Lieutenant General. He was appointed to command the 3rd Indian Corps in part of the Malaysian Command. And he was one of those guys that really clashed with Percival on multiple occasions on strategy. And he would be a POW, and that was pretty much his end of the military career. Next, we have General Gordon Bennett. Now, he is from the Australian Army. Had a pretty aggressive and successful career as a soldier, at a battalion level commander in World War I, fighting in Gallipoli and the Western Front. Between the wars, he was removed from the AIF because the commission was terminated as the army downsized, and he moved to civilian life. And he kind of like rejoined as a part-time officer, and he kind of like was given command of the 2nd Division in 1930. And in 1937, with tensions brewing up in Europe and war was definitely on the horizon, he actually nearly got kicked out of the army because he got in confrontation with the Military Board of Australia because he criticized their complacent policy on defense and the efficiency of the regular army officers. Yep, that's going to win you well. He was a candidate to be the overall commander of the Australian Imperial Force, but that was actually given to Thomas Blamey, MacArthur's favorite Australian, I would say. And the Chief of the General Staff of Australia, Sir Brundle Whites, was opposed to his appointment. He said because of his temperament, he was considered unsuitable for a semi diplomatic command and one that involved subordination to British generals. Bennett was as scathing of British officers as he was of Australian regulars. He commanded the Australian Home Guard and in 1941 was posted to Malaysia. And in December, when the invasion would begin, he was the commander of the West Force, which included the 27th Brigade, but not the 22nd Brigade. So kind of like was a bit of an insult to him because he wanted all Australian soldiers under his command, whereas the 22nd Brigade was actually transferred to the 3rd Indian Corps under General Lewis Heath. As we know, the Australians fought pretty valiantly, inflicting quite a lot of casualties during the battle, the retreat down the Malaysian Peninsula. But while I won't get into it here at this moment, but General Bennett was well known after the war for his decisions in Singapore. I'll just leave it there. Now, the last person I'd like to talk about is General Paris. He was one of the pre-war regular officers that continued serving. His father actually was a distinguished general from World War I. And as we discussed during the campaign, amongst the British units that fought valiantly and effectively, it was his 12th Brigade that was able to dish out quite a beating to the Japanese on several occasions, which is why they most of the time were utilized in rear guard positions. So a good bulk of the defenses that we've talked about in the previous few episodes, Craig, were mostly the 12th Brigade. They did take a pretty bad mauling during the Battle of the Slim River, and he would continue to serve as we discussed in Singapore, where he was given the Southern Command as per Percival's dispositions, and would meet quite a tragic end, which I think I'll talk about in the aftermath section.
All right. Just bring back up the map. Believing the western side of the causeway was far too obvious, Percival decided that the main landings would actually likely occur in the east. This is very important to note about this entire campaign. Unfortunately for him, this assumption would prove incorrect. Percival relied on patrols using sampans, I think I'm pronouncing it right, to secretly cross the strait for intelligence on the Japanese positions. Patrols to the east of the causeway discovered Japanese equipment on Ubin Island. Now, I just want to make sure, yeah, Ubin Island is prominently shown, okay, good, as Pulai Uban over on the right, which lies east of the strait. Coupled with the artillery fire on the Eastern Anglian Division's area, this seemed to confirm Percival's suspicion that the Japanese intended to strike the northeastern part of Singapore. We're going to probably get into it later, but Yamashita is basically firing his artillery in the eastern section on purpose to give this impression. However, 2 Australian patrols also reported a significant buildup of Japanese troops in the western sector. These patrols successfully identified large concentrations of enemy forces facing the western area, but observed very few landing craft on the Malayu River. This led Percival to dismiss the gathered intelligence as inconsequential, as the Malaya Command still believed that the main attack would come towards the northeastern sector rather than the northwest. The patrols struggled to locate where Yamashita was hiding his boats.